Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to stay updated with all our latest content. Join us and never miss out on the excitement. A lightning hits a tree on a rainy hill. A grim-faced man stares onto a battlefield. The year is 793 AD. Ragnar Lothbrok and his older brother Rollo are fighting a battle against some Baltic tribesmen. After killing their opponents, Rollo rests while Ragnar looks over the battlefield as ravens descend to feast on the flesh of the slain. Ragnar sees a mysterious man with a spear and a broad hat on the horizon, but when he rubs his eyes, the man is gone. Suddenly, he sees the same man on another part of the battlefield, with ravens on his shoulder and pointing at corpses with his spear. In his thoughts, Ragnar identifies the man as Odin. Valkyries descend from the clouds and bring with them several of the fallen to take to Valhalla. Rollo calls for his brother and Ragnar looks away. When he looks back, Odin and his Valkyries are gone, leaving Ragnar and the audience to question if the scene was real or not. At Ragnar's home and farm in Scandinavia, Ragnar is honing the fighting skills of his son, Björn. Meanwhile, his wife Lagertha and daughter, Gyda, have just come home from fishing. When Lagertha finds Ragnar preparing their son for the thing in Kattegat, Lagertha tries to convince Ragnar to delay making a man out of their young, 12-year-old son. Lagertha is not able to change her husband's mind. After the men of the house leave, two men appear, hoping to rape Lagertha. Lagertha displays her prowess as a shield maiden and effortlessly kills them with a fire iron. Meanwhile, Ragnar is lecturing his son, preparing him for his manhood. He tells him how he earned his mother's hand in marriage. When asked by Björn what a man does, he tells him that a man fights and protects his family. Later, Ragnar meets with Rollo and shows him what he calls a sun board, shown to him by a wanderer whom he met some time ago, telling him that it is indeed possible to travel to the west. Ragnar explains how the device would help guide them on the trip, but Rollo is still skeptical and disbelieving. At the thing, Earl Haraldson is presiding over the problems of his people and some criminal offenses. His steward and right-hand man, Svein, introduces to the crowd Erik Tryggvason, a man accused of murdering Sigvald Strutt. He pleads to have only killed the man in self-defense, but since he had not followed the normal procedure of declaring the death to the first person he sees, Haraldson proclaims him guilty after a unanimous decision from the spectators. Upon his request, his execution the following day will be by beheading. The next day, the man walks to his death with a smile, wanting to die well and without fear. The crowd then watches as the man is beheaded. Haraldson shocks the crowd when he curses the man to never enter Valhalla, the glorious afterlife of warriors. Ragnar tells Björn that he did not need to do it, but Haraldson had wanted the land Tryggvason had claimed to, suggesting that the verdict Haraldson had cast upon the man was personal. That night at the Great Feast, Haraldson officially recognizes Björn and another boy as men by giving them their arm rings, and both receive a kiss from the Earl's wife, Siggy. Delaying the discussion of the summer raids for the feast, Ragnar interrupts and asks him to discuss it first. Ragnar uses the opportunity to again talk about his plan to plunder the potentially more fruitful lands of the West. But Haraldson denies this idea, saying he shall not risk his ships or his reputation on a potentially fruitless and dangerous endeavor. He later summons Ragnar to his private quarters and chastises him for daring to speak out against him in his own hall. He warns Ragnar that as a farmer, he should be content with his lot, as his land is valuable, and there are many who would take it from him, likely referring to how he executed Tryggvason to possess his land. Haraldson then has a bad dream of his worst memory. Finding the dismembered corpses of his sons barely buried in a shallow grave, their faces against each other's backside. Waking up, Siggy tries to comfort him. Elsewhere, Ragnar and Björn meet with the seer. Ragnar asks the seer what the gods have in store for him. The seer gives him good news, saying the gods desire him to have a great future, but that they can withdraw their goodwill anytime. When Ragnar asks if he should challenge the law, the seer gives him vague answers, leaving a dissatisfied Ragnar to ponder the seer's words. Ragnar then takes Björn to see his eccentric shipbuilding friend Floki, who Ragnar has commissioned to make the ship they will be taking to the west. Ragnar and Björn come home. At dinner, Rollo asks Gyda if she is learning to use a shield like her shield-maiden mother. Lagertha then orders the children to bed to give the brothers some time alone, much to Björn's frustration, who claims that he is now a man and thus should no longer be ordered around. Ragnar and Rollo discuss their voyage to the west, and Rollo insists that he will not agree to being a subordinate to him. Ragnar asserts that, as brothers, they are equals. They decide to form their crew next. As soon as Ragnar steps out of the house, Rollo shows his affections for Lagertha, unsuccessfully trying to seduce her, much to her disgust. Lagertha calls him a great warrior who is not as good a man. Outside, Ragnar sees the raven again, which he takes as a sign about his confusion regarding the seer's advice. Ragnar comes in to tell his brother the good news, and he does not notice the tension in the room that he has interrupted. Floki, Ragnar, and Rollo are then seen testing the boat Floki has made. While initially, Floki does not think the boat will be capable of surviving the trip, he is proven wrong and celebrates. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to stay updated with all our latest content. Join us and never miss out on the excitement. Ragnar and Rollo arrives at a secret meeting with their crew about their journey to the west, including Thorstein, Leif, and Arn. Rollo points out they will be all equals, and thus the profits will be equally shared as well. One man named Nut skeptically asks if there will be any, as Ragnar's dream is just based on stories. Ragnar tells everything start with stories. When Eric warns about Earl Haraldsson's order to go east, Ragnar assures him the Earl does not know about their boat. Ragnar further convinces the men that this journey will be an opportunity to shine in battle, to impress the gods and return with more plunder than they have ever seen. Ragnar personally asks Nut if he is coming, which he agrees to so he can tell his children a good story. The housecarl, Olafur, notifies Earl Haraldsson of the meeting and the presence of Ragnar Lothbrok. The Earl thinks that they should watch first, even though he is tempted to execute Ragnar right away. When the Earl notices the glancing of the housecarl at Siggy, his wife, he asks him if he wants to sleep with her, and if so, it can be arranged. Ragnar arrives at home. Lagertha wants to join him on their journey to the west, but Ragnar declines, as someone needs to keep an eye on the children, as Earl Haraldsson might claim their home if he discovers the defiance of his orders. Olafur attempts to sleep with Siggy, but it turns out to be a trap, as Earl Haraldsson only wanted to test his loyalty. As a result, Svein kills him by stabbing him in the gut before he is finished with axes. Lagertha, angry with Ragnar's refusal to take her with him, attacks her husband viciously with a shield before their son, Bjorn, stops them. Siggy remarks she is surprised that of all Haraldsson's men, Olafur is the one to behave in disloyalty. She says that honor is a rare commodity, to which Haraldsson replies that men in who he can trust are rare as well. When Siggy remarks their enemies are everywhere, Haraldsson agrees with a concerned tone, indicating he is wary in who he can trust, even his own men. At Floki's home, where the crew for the journey to the west assembles, Nut, who is Earl Haraldsson's half-brother and who was supposed to join Ragnar on his journey, informs the Earl of their departure. With the sunboard, Ragnar navigates the open sea. They go through a storm, forcing them to lower the sail and proceed rowing. Thunder and lightning surrounds the ship, to which Rollo replies Thor is angry with them and strikes his hammer to sink them. Floki, however, sees it as Thor celebrating because he loved the ship he built. At the Lindisfarne Monastery in the Kingdom of Northumbria, monks are watching out of a window at the raging storm. In the flashes of lightning, a cloud resembling the shape of the prow of a Viking ship can be seen. Concerned, one of the monks named Athelstan goes to the father of the monastery to tell him Judgment Day has come. The father does not want to hear of it and orders Athelstan to go back to his dormitory to pray God for forgiveness, as everything will be well when the storm passes. In Kattegat, the blacksmith who forged the anchor of Ragnar's ship is confronted by Earl Haraldsson and his men. At first he denies forging any anchor, but when Svein is about to seize his daughter, he gives in. Earl Haraldsson orders him to look at the flames in the fire pit and asks what he sees. When the blacksmith answers he sees his death, Svein pushes his face in the fire despite the blacksmith's daughter pleading to leave her father be. On the sea, Hakon loses faith and accuses Ragnar to be a madman in league with Loki, sending them to their doom. Unable to calm him, Ragnar has no choice but to kill Hakon and throw him overboard. Ragnar orders the ravens they took with them to be released. If they return quickly, there is no land. If they don't come back, they have found land. When they hear the flapping of bird wings, Ragnar thinks the ravens returned and his journey is in vain. However, the birds turn out to be seagulls, indicating they are close to the shores of England. A monk notices the arriving Viking ship and alarms the monastery. Hearing the bells, Ragnar realizes their presence is noticed. The monks takes refuge in the church. Hearing their prayers, Ragnar forces open the doors of the monastery, and he and the Vikings enter. As the monks continue with their prayers, Rollo suddenly kills the father, causing panic under the monks, of which many are slaughtered by the Norsemen. While Ragnar solemnly looks, seeking through the buildings, to find the treasury room. Surprised the treasures are left in the open, Leif wonders if their god protects it somehow. Ragnar discovers they are not alone and drags Athelstan out of his hiding place. When the monk pleads for his life, Ragnar is surprised he can speak the Norse language, to which Athelstan says he has traveled to Scandinavia in the past. Ragnar asks Athelstan about the book he holds in his hands. It is the Gospel of St. John. When Ragnar asks why the monk chose to protect that instead of any treasures, Athelstan replies that without the word of God, there can be only darkness. Rollo enters the room, remarking it is a strange place with only men. When he notices Athelstan, he insists on killing him, but Ragnar forbids it as the monk is worth more alive than death. Surprised, Rollo reminds his brother they are equals and attempts to kill Athelstan anyway. However, Ragnar pushes his brother back, causing Rollo to angrily chop the crucifix in the room in pieces and telling Athelstan that is how much he respects his god before storming off. Meanwhile, Floki enters a room with many holy papers. Unable to read them, Floki burns one of them, eventually setting the monastery on fire. The Norsemen returns to their ship with treasure, and some monks having survived the onslaught, including Athelstan, taken as slaves. Ragnar returns to Kattegat with slaves and treasure. Ladritha protects their farm when Svein comes searching for Ragnar. Ragnar learns that the priest he enslaved is named Athelstan. Once they hit land, Nut tells Ragnar that Earl Haraldson wishes to see him. The Earl confiscates all the treasure, but allows them to take one thing for themselves. The Earl asks what Ragnar will take for himself, and he decides to take Athelstan as his slave. After, Rollo is upset that Ragnar gave in so easily to the Earl. Ragnar tells him not to worry, that this is only the beginning. Rollo shows him that he had hidden some treasure away for himself, and Ragnar tells him that that was a stupid thing to do. Ragnar returns home. He shows the children the priest and lets them touch him. Ragnar and his group make their way towards the town. Rollo gets upset because Ragnar says that they aren't going to attack until the next day, Sunday. King Egil is told about the raiders. He wants to know where they come from. Ragnar makes them wait until they hear the church bells before they attack. Once they do, they find the village to be empty because they are all at church. Ragnar invades the church and instructs the priest to tell his people not to resist. Outside, his men loot and raid the village. Nut tries to rape one of the women, but Ladritha stops him. He turns his attention to her next. Nut gets her pinned against a wall and tries to rape her, but she knees him in the balls and kills him. After the raid, Ragnar asks where Nut is, and Ladritha tells him that she killed him. He asks if anyone saw, and she says no. They head back to the boat, but when they arrive, the Saxons are waiting for them. They engage them in battle. While they are outnumbered, Ragnar's group still manages to win. The Saxons surviving as Lord Wygia flee. Ragnar and his men mourn the death of one of their own, Kako, and kill the Saxon that led them to the town. Athelstan looks after the children. Bjorn suggests that they head into Kattegat, but Athelstan says no. Bjorn says he wants to make a sacrifice to Odin for Ragnar's safe return. Athelstan asks what would he sacrifice, and Bjorn says him. Later, Athelstan speaks to God and is angry with him for putting him in this situation. He goes and wakes up Bjorn and tells him that he will take him to Kattegat. Ragnar and his warband return to Kattegat. He is greeted by Earl Haraldson, who asks where Nut is. Ragnar tells him that he's dead. He lies and tells him that he killed him instead of Ladritha. He tells the Earl that Nut tried to rape his wife. The Earl tells him that he doesn't believe him and has him taken away. Rollo is summoned by the Earl. He tells Rollo that he'll give him some of the pillaged treasure if only he'll step out of Ragnar's shadow. The Earl also introduces him to his daughter. He tells Rollo that the man he chooses to marry her to will be like his own son. Ragnar is brought before the Earl and Siggy. The Earl makes Ragnar out to be the villain. Ragnar asks the men what they would have done if they'd seen Nut trying to rape their wives. Svein asks Ragnar if he's really going to stick to this story. Lagertha tells them that she can confirm that it happened. The Earl says that she's just covering for him because she's his wife. She reveals to all of them that she killed Nut, not Ragnar. The king still doesn't believe her. Svein tells them that they have a witness to the killing. Rollo steps forward. Rollo tells them that he saw everything. But instead of saying that Ragnar killed Nut in cold blood, he says that Ragnar had a good reason to kill him. Therefore, they can't punish him. Ragnar is set free. They have a party. Ragnar thanks Athelstan for taking care of his children. Lagertha thanks Rollo for what he did. Rollo says that he didn't do it for Ragnar, that he did it for her. Suddenly, they are attacked by a group of men. They survive, but Eric is killed. Ragnar and his family return to the farm. Ragnar is upset because of his friend's death. He grabs his roll and heads out while Athelstan watches him leave. The Earl seeks the advice of the seer. The seer tells him that there will be violence and that Ragnar searches for the Earl's death. Athelstan asks Lagertha why Ragnar goes and sits up on the hill. Later, he realizes that Ragnar is preparing himself for what's to come. Earl Haraldson and Siggy bless babies. Ragnar and Athelstan head down the river. Athelstan asks Ragnar if he's still a slave. Ragnar says, does it make a difference? Athelstan says that he'd like to be a free man. Athelstan asks Ragnar what he's preparing for. Athelstan says that he's watched him and that he's about to do something. Ragnar says that he isn't strong enough, and Athelstan asks what the gods say. This upsets Ragnar, who tells Athelstan to finish cleaning the fish in silence. Earl Haraldson gathers his men. Ragnar goes hunting. While he's away, his village gets attacked by Earl Haraldson. Lagertha gives Athelstan a weapon and tells them to stay strong while they wait for Ragnar to return. Ragnar makes it to his house, but he gets shot in the process. He makes his family go beneath the house so that they can get to the boat. Ragnar surrenders, giving his family time to escape. Ragnar manages to escape, but they give chase. He leads them to a cliff where he jumps off. He lands in the water, but Athelstan has to jump in and grab him. Earl Haraldson asks if he's dead, and they tell him that they don't know. The Earl tells them to seize his boat, and if they find his family, to bring them to him. Ragnar and his family sail to Floki's home. There they seek his help because Ragnar is dying. Earl Haraldson sets his daughter up with Earl Bjarni, and this upsets Siggy. Lagertha, her children, and Athelstan all say prayers to their gods to help heal Ragnar. Earl Haraldson tells Siggy that this marriage will bring them land and important alliances. Haraldson tells Siggy about the shallow grave that the killers dug for his sons, how they cut their heads off and put their faces against their asses as a sign of disrespect. He hands her locks of hair from their heads that he took. Ragnar gets a visit from Thorstein, who tells them that they are also being watched. Later, at night, Thorstein asks him what Ragnar is going to do. Ragnar says he can't do anything until he's healed. His friend also tells him that the boat has been confiscated and that it's now going to be Thyri's dowry for her upcoming marriage. Rollo attends Thyri's wedding. Earl Haraldson tells Rollo that that could have been him dancing with his daughter. Rollo says he wasn't fated to marry her. The Earl asks why he's here, and Rollo says that they should talk. Rollo tells him that Ragnar is dead. He tells him that he wants to be a part of the raiding and no longer on the outside. The Earl tells him that he can live with him and work on his boats, and then they shall see. Rollo agrees. Floki tells them about Valhalla and the gods. He asks Athelstan how he thinks the world was made. Athelstan doesn't say anything. Rollo gets a visit from Siggy. She tells him that he should leave because her husband hates him. He's walking through the village when he gets clubbed. He's taken to Earl Haraldson's house where he is chained to the table. The Earl asks him where Ragnar is, but Rollo says that he is dead. The Earl says that he'll help him tell the truth and takes a knife and starts cutting through his cheek. Thorstein returns to Floki's to tell them about how Siggy visited him and told him about the trick the Earl played on Rollo. How the Earl tortured Rollo. Thorstein tells him that the Earl is going to kill Rollo, and Floki tells Ragnar that it's a trap. Ragnar asks Floki to go to Kattegat and demand a one-on-one combat from the Earl. That if the Earl refuses, then shame will stalk him for the rest of his life, and he'll never be welcomed into Valhalla. Ragnar, weak and still recovering from his wounds, must meet the Earl head-on after it comes to light that Rollo has been tortured on Haraldsson's orders. The two men will come together face-to-face with a single outcome possible. Only one man will leave this fight alive. Floki is brought before Earl Haraldsson. He tells the Earl that Ragnar challenges him to one-on-one combat. The Earl accepts his challenge. Lagertha tells Ragnar that he's too weak to fight. Ragnar says that maybe this will make them equals. Siggy tells the Earl that he needs to come to bed and sleep. The Earl tells her that he has the utmost respect for Ragnar because he was what the Earl used to be. Siggy asks why he didn't support him when he asked to West. The Earl says that because if he had, his supporters would have left him and gone to Ragnar instead. Siggy makes him promise that he'll win tomorrow, and he says yes. The Earl prays for the god's favor. Siggy gives him a necklace with their son's hair attached. Ragnar arrives in Kattegat for the personal combat. The Earl and Ragnar fight. Ragnar wins. He offers mercy by cutting the Earl's wrist so that he may go to Valhalla. Svein tells the crowd to kill Ragnar, but Rollo grabs an axe and kills him. Siggy stabs Bjarni, freeing her daughter from him. She approaches Ragnar and tells the crowd to yell his name because he's now Earl. They head to the hall where people come before Ragnar and swear their loyalty. Rollo swears his loyalty, but when Ragnar hugs him, Rollo asks him how they'll ever be equal now. Athelstan asks Ragnar why he's giving the Earl such a funeral. Ragnar says because he was a good man and he deserves one. Ragnar shows Athelstan one of the servants that has agreed to die so that she can serve the Earl in the afterlife. The servant is taken to the boat. Her throat is slit and she is put on the boat beside Earl Haraldsson. Athelstan is forced to watch her die by Bjorn. Ragnar arrives to the pier where Siggy asks permission to light the pyre. Ragnar gives the torch to another man who goes and sets the boat on fire. They push the boat out into the water. Lagertha tells Ragnar that she's pregnant again. Ragnar says that she's made him a happy man. Siggy and Thyri are trying to pack up when Rollo appears. Siggy thinks he's here to kill them, but Rollo says no. Siggy says that the people are going to make them leave Kattegat, but Rollo says not if he vouches for them. Siggy asks what he wants in return, and he says that he wants her to marry him. Bjorn tells Ragnar that he wants to go to England with him. Ragnar says no and tells him not to be so impatient to put himself in danger. Athelstan asks what Ragnarök is. The seer comes and tells them about Ragnarok and how it's the end of the world. Ragnar and his men go raiding. King Egil learns that Ragnar didn't land in Northumbria, but is continuing up the coast. He kills Lord Wygia for losing to Ragnar. Lord Ethelwulf has been charged with leading King Egil's armies against Ragnar and his men. Ragnar sets up camp and waits for the Northumbrian soldiers to arrive. Meanwhile, in Scandinavia, Lagertha runs Kattegat and deals with petitioners. Ethelwulf observes from above the camp that the Vikings have made. They decide not to strike, but to somehow make the Vikings give up their position. Rollo and Ragnar are aware of them watching, but Ragnar says that he first wants to see what they'll do. In the middle of the night, Ragnar and his group of men attack. They win and take the camp captive. Ragnar asks Ethelwulf if they shall go visit the king. King Egil is upset that his brother has lost. The cardinal thinks that this is the work of God, while another thinks it's the work of the devil. One lord thinks that they should just pay off the Vikings so that they'll go away. The Vikings arrive and are invited in to talk with King Egil. Instead, they turn around and head back the way they came. They return later because Ragnar wants to see the way that they live. He is brought before King Egil, and they are invited to the feast. King Egil asks what it would take for the Vikings to leave and to hand over his brother. Ragnar says 2,000 pounds. The king accepts his terms, but tells them that they must remain in their camp until he can round up that kind of money. He also says that he wants one of Ragnar's group to become Christian. Rollo volunteers to be baptized. Siggy goes to visit Lagertha. She tells Lagertha that she'd like to serve her. Lagertha says that it's not necessary, but Athelstan points out that it could help Siggy be happy. Lagertha says that if it's really what she wants, then she accepts her offer. She tells Siggy that she and her daughter are now under her protection. Rollo is baptized and King Egil tells Ragnar to return to his ships to await payment. Jida can't sleep, so she goes to lay with Lagertha. Floki is upset with Rollo because he feels like he betrayed the gods. King Egil is true to his word and sends a cart full of money. Or so they think, but once they check the boxes, they are empty. King Eal's men attack them unawares, but Ragnar and his men face them head-on. During the fight, Rollo kills many Christians to prove to Floki that Odin is no longer mad at him. After, Ragnar goes to talk with Lord Ethelwolf. Lord Ethelwolf asks him to give him the chance to talk to his brother to persuade him to keep his word. Ragnar asks why shouldn't he just kill him now, and Ethelwolf says because then he'd have nothing left to bargain with. Ragnar does kill him and sends him back to King Eal by attaching him to a horse. Ladrutha goes into labor and is helped by Siggy. After receiving Ragnar's message, King Eal keeps his word and pays him his money. Ragnar and his men leave. King Eal swears that one day he'll avenge himself on Ragnar. Ragnar tells Athelstan that during this time of year they usually make the pilgrimage to Uppsala. That this year he wasn't going to go because he was too busy. But then his unborn son is taken from him, and he wonders what he's done to anger the gods. He's decided to go and to take the children with them since it will be their first time. He asks Athelstan if he'll come with them. Athelstan says that yes, he'll go with them. Ladrutha notices that Ragnar is distant and asks him if he's not happy that they are going on this pilgrimage. Ragnar is upset because of the loss of his son, but Ladrutha says that they can have more sons. Ragnar points out that they've been trying and it hasn't happened again. Ragnar and his group arrive at Uppsala. Ragnar asks Odin who will bear his sons since Ladrutha cannot. Athelstan learns that there is 9 of every sacrifice, including humans. Athelstan is offered drink and shrooms. Ladrutha notices that Ragnar wants to go out into the festival. She begs him to stay. Athelstan is high and wanders around the festival. He runs into Ragnar, who goes around him. Thyri approaches Athelstan and kisses him. She leads him off to somewhere they can be alone. Jida tells Ladrutha that she's bleeding, and Ladrutha says that she is a woman now. Thyri bathes Athelstan. Athelstan asks Thyri why she does this, and she says that she has to. Ragnar comes and brings Athelstan to meet King Horik. Ragnar offers him his fealty and his service to Horik. Horik accepts and asks what he can do for him in return. Ragnar says that he wants to send bigger raiding parties to the west. Horik agrees to help Ragnar sail west and discover new worlds. Siggy is upset at Rollo for coming back to their tent after having been with other women. He asks her why she keeps pestering him, and that he is who he is and that he won't change. He tells her that one day he'll be a great man and she'll regret leaving him just because he sleeps with other women. She tells him that he needs her just as much as she needs him. That he would have known about Ragnar's meeting with King Horik if he'd been with her. King Horik says that he wants to put Ragnar's fame to use. Ragnar asks for what, and Horik tells him about Borg and how he claims to be entitled to some of Horik's land. That he threatens Horik's territory. Ragnar asks how he can be of help. Horik asks if Ragnar he'll travel to Borg as his emissary. That if Ragnar is successful, Horik will be forever in his debt. Athelstan is pulled aside by the seer. He's taken to the temple and asked by one of the priests if he came here of his own free will. Athelstan says yes. The priest asks him if he's still a Christian. Athelstan says no, but the priest makes him say it 3 times. The priest asks if he knows why he's here and tells Athelstan that he's been brought to Uppsala as a sacrifice. Athelstan tries to grab hold of his cross pendant, but the priest catches his hand and reveals that Athelstan was lying. The seer tells them that Athelstan is unworthy of being a sacrifice, that one of them amongst their group must volunteer to be a sacrifice. Leif volunteers to be sacrificed for the sake of his family and friends. Athelstan, Ragnar, and his family watch as the sacrifices are killed. Ragnar and his men arrive at Borg's. Borg tells them that it's his land, and that's all he has to say in the matter. Ragnar says that King Horik wants peace, and maybe they can come to some sort of agreement. Borg asks what his name is, and Ragnar tells him who he is. Borg tells his men to give them new clothes and feed them, and that tomorrow Ragnar and he will talk again. Jida tells Ladrutha that she hasn't eaten in 3 days. Ladrutha says that she's fearful, and Siggy tells her to go see the seer. Ladrutha says that sometimes it's not good to know their own fate. Ragnar tells Borg that King Horik is willing to pay him to renounce his claim to the land. Borg tells him that the land is priceless. Borg says that at the moment his price is King Horik's head. Ragnar says that then he'll be going. Borg says that there must be some other way. He suggests his claim be acknowledged, and he leases the land back to the king, or they could share the mineral rights. Ragnar says that he wasn't given the authority to negotiate. Borg says that why doesn't he send a messenger to Horik to get his permission? Ragnar agrees to this. Floki is sent back to King Horik. Ladritha goes to visit the seer. She tells him that she's been having strange dreams. Ladritha asks what they want, and the seer says that they want to take something from her. The seer tells her that her husband is in danger, but won't tell her from what. Borg asks how Rollo gets on with his brother. Rollo says that they get on well. Borg tells him that he had a brother once, but his brother poisoned his wife. He blinded him with his own hands and then burned him alive. Rollo says that Ragnar would never do something like that. Borg says that that's because he's a great warrior. Rollo says so is he, but Borg says he's never heard of him. Ragnar must apologize to a woman who two of his men saw bathing. He invites the woman to come to their camp to join them. Ladritha tells Siggy that it's true that Ragnar is in danger, that she thinks he's in danger of himself. The woman, a slog, comes to their camp and Ragnar invites her to join them on their journey to the ash tree. Siggy tells Ladritha about a fever that her cousin's son caught, how 1 minute he was fine and the next her cousin was burying him in the ground. Siggy passes out on her way to see Thyri. Ladritha tries to take care of her, but Siggy tells her to look after her daughter. Athelstan is taking care of Thyri. Bjorn is upset because he believes Ragnar is making a fool of himself by talking with a slog. Rollo tells Borg that he always talks about Ragnar. Borg says that that's because Ragnar is his earl. Borg tries to bribe him with women, but Rollo says he doesn't have to. Borg asks him what he really wants. Floki tells Horik that Borg won't sell, but that he wants to make a deal. Horik says that he isn't interested in deals. Ladritha takes care of the sick people, including Jida, who tells Ladritha that she is going to die. Ladritha tells her that she's wrong. A slog reveals to Ragnar that she's a princess and that both of her parents are dead now. Ragnar kisses a slog. Later, Bjorn wakes up and sees Ragnar having sex with a slog. Bjorn confronts Ragnar the next day and tells him that he hates him. Bjorn makes him swear to him that it won't happen again. Ragnar does as he's asked. Siggy cries out after discovering that Thyri has died. Ladritha has the dead bodies burned. A slog visits Ragnar in the middle of the night, but Ragnar tells her no. Ladritha makes a sacrifice in the middle of the night. Athelstan wakes up the next day and discovers that Jida has died. A slog tells Ragnar that she's carrying his child. Floki returns to Borg's. He tells them that King Horik said that he will make no compromises and no deals. That Borg must name his price. Borg tells Ragnar that his men must leave in the morning, unless Ragnar wants to renounce his allegiance to King Horik. Ragnar doesn't say anything. Jida is burned on a pyre. Borg tells Rollo that he must attack King Horik. He knows that Ragnar won't support him, but Rollo will. Bjorn wakes up in the middle of the night to find a raven on the roof. Ragnar goes to a slog's room in the middle of the night. Ladritha stands by the pyres long after everyone's left. Rollo accepts Borg's offer to fight with him against his brother. See you in the next video.
Ragnar. Ring. That's his name. Who wants to be king?